Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the How Did It Happen podcast. I'm so happy to have you here, as I am every week, every episode. And as you know, if you've been listening to this podcast, my goal with it is to inspire, activate, and maximize the greatness in every one of you, in everyone that's listening. And my goal, why that's a goal, why that's a mission of mine, is because that's what I'm trying to do for myself every day. And if not every day, definitely every week. I'm focused on being the best that I can be in all aspects of my life, the best that I can be. And it's hard. Doing that, focusing on that is hard. It's a lot easier to focus on being the average that I can be, or better than someone else, at least in my mind. So this is really hard. And every guest that I bring on and every success story that I explore, I'm trying to get to the point where I can, have you walk away with a little bit more confidence about activating and maximizing the greatness inside of you. And today, I'm going to talk about something that I think gets in the way oftentimes of achieving, maximizing, activating that greatness. And it gets in the way of us imagining the futures that we want and making those futures happen. And I'm going to call this the how to overcome the 5 fallacies that trap leaders and kill futures. And and hopefully you're like me, but I actually don't hope you're like me, but this probably resonates with you. I have a past, and I have experiences, and I have things that I believe. I have things that I tell myself. I've been conditioned in certain ways, and all of those things and a lot of other things have sort of, conspired along the way to help me or prompt me or make me create stories about who I am and what life means, what business means, what future means, what, all kinds of things mean. And I'm going to limit this to a business context today, but I call those stories, a lot of those stories are just that. They're stories that I made up, and I not only made them up, but I made up what I believe about them. And along my entrepreneurial journey, I discovered, like in an earlier episode, I talked about walls and tearing down walls, and fallacies are similar. I discovered that I had been living with certain stories, certain belief systems that I had assigned truth to along the way at some point, and they just weren't true. That was just what I had assigned to them. So I'm calling those fallacies, and there are a lot of fallacies that I have today. I'm only going to talk to you about 5. And those 5 are: 1, I'm a decision machine. 2, I need to be selfless. 3, I'm on my own. 4, I'm responsible. And 5, I know the truth. And believing in those five fallacies put me in a place that I've come to call the valley of uncertainty. And it's a place where entrepreneurs and leaders of all kinds go or fall into or get trapped into when fallacies and circumstances take over, and they zap energy, and they zap confidence, and they zap thinking about the future, and they zap progress. And you go there and you sort of wallow there for a while, and it starts to feel comfortable. And then all of a sudden you're in a place you don't like, but you don't know how to get out of. And fallacies help keep you stuck there. And so let's talk about a few fallacies. But before we start, let's talk about what the definition of a fallacy is. So a fallacy is a mistaken belief. especially one based on an unsound argument. So it's a mistaken belief, especially one based on an unsound argument. And as I mentioned, the way that fallacies get created is from stories that we tell ourselves. And, stories aren't good or bad. They're just stories. It's what we assign to them that makes them real. And so these were 5 fallacies that I assigned realness and truth to. And I want to talk you through how I broke down those fallacies and changed the story that I believe. And I think that fallacies are so important to break down, because whenever you have these fallacies that you're living your life with, not only are you not getting the future that you want, but you're also failing to shift. And shifts, I talked about in an earlier episode as well. Shifts always be pivots, and shifts are super required. They're a natural part of evolving in life. Movement in a different direction or a slight course of action change is what shifts do, and they're important to get through fallacies, because if you fail to shift, you fail to move forward, you tend to get stuck, and then you're in a valley of uncertainty of your own, for example. So these are the 5 fallacies. One that I'm going to talk about at least today. One, I'm a decision machine. See if this resonates with you. So I prided myself and I assigned value to the belief that I was really good at making decisions. I loved having the skill set and the awareness and the tribal knowledge and whatever else combined together that allowed me to make quick decisions in my business. And I not only valued myself on being able to make decisions, I valued myself on the quickness with which I could make a decision and how satisfied most people seemed with most of the decisions that I was making, at least in front of me. It may have been a totally different story when they walked away. And eventually, I actually set up my company so that I had to make a lot of decisions, because, it was sort of set up like this, where, I've had all these people doing all these things, but ultimately I set it up so like, hey, run it past me, oh yeah, let's do that. And then, so no one was really as free to act autonomously and to make their own decisions. They sort of came to me because that's how I designed it. That's how I thought I wanted it. And everyone just did what they thought I wanted, because that's usually what happens in an entrepreneurial run organization, and maybe all organizations. But what occurred to me when I was in the valley of uncertainty, and I was there for several years trying to figure out how I was going to move forward, I was making a lot of decisions, but I wasn't making very few choices. Like, and it occurred to me that decisions were like these sort of quick things that I made for the reasons I've already talked about, and I assigned value to those, and I made it so that those were coming at me kind of all the time, and I made me feel like I was doing my job. But what it prevented me from doing was what was really my job as the entrepreneur, as the leader, and that is, thinking deliberately and intentionally about the things I wanted, the things we needed, the things in the future that had to happen, and then decide, making a choice as to what those were, and then bringing them back. So I look at decisions as sort of these quick kind of, maybe even insignificant things. I mean, I want to say it's not important, but then I started looking at choices as being, those are the things that I really need to be doing as a leader, making intentional, thoughtful, well-considered choices about what I wanted, where I wanted to be, both me personally and the company. So that's fallacy number one. I'm a decision machine, or decisions versus choices. Fallacy number two, I need to be selfless. I was built and learned how, I had no idea what I was doing when I started my first company, and probably the second as well. But what I knew was that, if the saying is, if you put other people first, they'll always, have your back, and they'll always, take care of you. And if you don't ask someone to do something that you wouldn't do, then that builds, trust, and it builds a team. And if you put everybody else's needs first, you are going to win bigger in the end. I believe that. I practice that. And it didn't get me what I wanted. In fact, it made me frustrated, and it made me, I was unhappy. I couldn't figure out why modeling this behavior of being selfless wasn't something that, people saw and then acted on themselves. And so they actually took away the need for me to be selfless, because they sort of took the incentive to be, to take care of things that I had been helping them take care of, for example. And it was such stupid thinking, because on my part, because again, like the decisions things, I was modeling behavior that everybody saw as what, interpreted it as what I wanted. And why would someone tell you to, get in the way of something that you actually want? So you've got this huge disconnect. And it occurred to me again, while I was in the Valley, that I had it all wrong, that this whole selfless servant leader thing, this level 5 leader that Jim Collins talked about in his Good to Great book, was, I had it backward. So I just had to realize that if I didn't spend time thinking about what I wanted my future to be, what I wanted my company to be, what I wanted our team to be like, if I didn't take that selfish time to really apply myself to that kind of thinking, I was never going to be the leader that I could be. And I was never going to create the company that I wanted. And I was never going to be able to build the team that I needed and I might say deserved. So the switch for me came when I decided that I needed to get selfish before I could ever be selfless. See, once I was selfish and once I really had a handle on what I wanted, then I could build everything the way that I needed it in order to accomplish that. And then I could be very selfless again, because I would only be needing to help in the areas where I was, happened to have, the important or the necessary perspective or skill set, instead of and everybody else could do the things that they were good at. And then, so I wasn't in a position where I had to put everybody else first, because they were putting what needed to be put first, and they were acting on it. And I was only, it just made me a much better leader. It made me a much better entrepreneur, and it opened my eyes and my brain up to this amazing thing that was possible, because I had been selfish, and because I would continue to be selfish when I needed to be, in order to be selfless and unlock the potential in our company. So that's fallacy number 2. Fallacy number 3, I'm on my own. In an earlier episode, solo episode, I talked about walls. As I mentioned, I built these walls around me for many, many, many years. And then I lived inside of those walls. And I thought that that's what brought value to me. That's what brought value to my team. That's what brought value to our company. And in the dream stage, which is sort of stage one of the entrepreneurial journey, and maybe even in the grind stage, which is stage two, that may very well have been necessary. And I don't regret having done it. But at a certain time, I've learned everything I can from the people around me. I've learned everything I can from our clients and customers, for example. I've learned everything I can inside of these walls that I constructed. And, I'm just becoming inside of those walls. I'm becoming a bigger, sort of fatter fish in a smaller pond. And I needed to tear down those walls and get outside of them, because that's outside of those walls where all the answers were, and all the people were, and all the resources were to help me get thinking about where I wanted and needed to be to accomplish my goals, to create my future. I know that everyone doesn't suffer with that I'm on my own problem. It's not a fallacy for everyone, but it was for me. And in my experience with a lot of entrepreneurs, it may be even the most extroverted, the most networked. They are often living inside walls that are keeping them from their maximum potential. And I like to, because I was able to point it out, finally point out that fallacy in my life, I like to talk about it and inspire people to see it in theirs if it's there, and have the confidence and the tools to get out, break down, tear down those walls, and maximize their future greatness. Number 4 is the fallacy was I'm responsible. So I took personal responsibility in my business for everything that was happening, especially the bad stuff. So we, and I guess when my partner Butch died as a result of being burned in a fire at one of our plants in 2003, that was about 11 years into our business. And that was sort of just, I felt responsible for that, personally responsible, as I had for many other things that had occurred. And that was the incident that I think really dropped me into the valley of uncertainty in the first place. And then, I keep telling myself, I'm responsible. And it's just building and building and building and building. And I could at least only take so much of that building on me, because not only was it a weight, but it was also a confidence crusher. So, every time I take personal responsibility for something, I'm saying this is a part of me. This is something that is who I am. And it's a huge load, and it chips away and breaks away at your confidence. And when I was in the valley, I am thinking about these things. I thought, well, I think what I need I think the way I need to process these things is that I have responsibility for them, but I am not personally responsible. In other words, I still have to deal with everything that happens, just like every owner, every entrepreneur, every leader has to deal appropriately with everything that happens. But having, approaching it as something that is a part of you, a reflection of you, part of your DNA, you're responsible for, is unhealthy. And I think it diminishes, it's unhealthy. It may diminish, but I think it knocks you off course. It certainly knocked me off course. When I shifted that to I have responsibility for, it did, like I said, it didn't change the circumstances at all. It didn't change the situation, but it made it about, making progress through whatever it was, as opposed to getting stuck or dropping into a valley that overwhelmed me, that I couldn't possibly, get past. That was not a reflection of me, but it became a reflection of me. So that shift from, I'm responsible to I have responsibility for was a fallacy that completely opened my brain, my mind, and my mindset to progress, to something that I could actually move forward and drag me and help walk me out of that valley. And the fifth one is that I know the truth. And this sort of wraps up the theme of this whole thing. You know, fallacies are stories. They are not good or bad. They may not be, true or false. They just are. And for me, going along with the responsible for, every story that I was telling myself I was responsible for was something that I was seeing as a truth and about me. And some of them I didn't like. I didn't want those to be truths about me, but I felt like, well, they're truths. I didn't know where else to put them, in other words. Until I started thinking about, I can't change facts. So facts are facts. But a fact about me, for example, is not a truth, meaning it's not forever. It's just a fact. It's just something along the journey that happened that, whether I did or it just happened on my watch or whatever. And I need to acknowledge that, but I also need to make room for, the rest of the story. The future story. Because when I was trapped thinking that those facts were the truth, they were limiting me, in my thinking about where could I actually end up? What did I want? And how was I going to get it? And the valley, another benefit of being in the valley, it helped me think, and it helped me understand that I could erase the stories that I was telling myself. Like in the old days when you had a chalkboard and you erased it at the end of every day. Now, just because I erased it didn't mean that whatever was on there was gone. It wasn't gone. It was trapped in the eraser, and it was in the dust of the chalk. But what it did with erasing it is it freed up space. So just like when you go into school the next day, once the space was freed up, the knowledge, the facts were still there and the chalk dust, but I now had, instead of telling myself that's on the blackboard, that's on the blackboard, that's on the blackboard, I was now able to say, oh, my blackboard is blank. So now what do I want to put on the blackboard? What do I want that to say? What do I want the facts to be? And how am I going to, create that story, the story that I want to tell? So fallacy number 9 is that, I know the truth. That is a fallacy. I can't change the past, but I can make room for the future that I want. So in closing, I just want to remind everybody that a fallacy is a mistaken belief, especially one based on an unsound argument. And I'm hopeful that going through those 5 fallacies, and there's a lot more to those, of course, but going through those 5 fallacies that, trapped me as a leader and killed my future for a period of time, might also be happening inside of you. And you might want to think about that. And if you decide that that is what's happening inside of you, I hope this inspires, activates, and maximizes your willingness and your ability to, erase that and start telling yourself the story you want to tell, the one you want to believe, the one you want others to believe, the one that will make your future your property. Thanks for listening. If you are so inclined, hit the follow button or the subscribe button, depending on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. And you'll get every episode that way. And I would love to have you on my team getting inspired, activated, and maximized when it comes to your greatness every time we put out a new episode. You can also visit me at MikeMalatesta.com. Until next time, thanks.
podcast is brought to you by WINJECT Studios. We are an all-in-one educational platform for podcasters that revolutionizes how hosts leverage content to increase engagement with listeners, downloads, and income. We come together to focus on community, collaboration, and collective impact. For more information on how you can interact directly with our hosts, access exclusive live content with offers you can't get anywhere else from our official partners, join our purpose-driven community by visiting www.winject.com. If you're ready to build a career doing what you love, then we're ready to see you there.